Bless you. All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Week 2, 280, CIS280. As far as agenda, I know we mentioned this last week, but it's only week 2, so I'll mention a couple more weeks. Come in, sign in like you guys did, gals did, and then from 4:30 to like 5:15, we will do discussion. 5:15 to 6-ish, around there, in-class exercise. From 6 to 7:25, we're technically agenda-wise or course schedule-wise in here. That's lab time to work on last week's stuff or next week's stuff. So that's a weekly agenda. So I did bump up the due dates to the following Monday at 11:59. So everything due week 1 is tonight at 11:59. Week 2 is next Monday at 11:59. Make sense? We're going to continually look at Swift Playgrounds. We're going to do your very first Hello World in Xcode during your in class. Your take home will be more Swift Playground stuff, which has to do with more variables, learning more variables. We'll discuss more variables as well. Also, each week I'll try to highlight Apple news of the day. And just so you know, next week campus is closed for Labor Day. And so, campus is closed Tuesday as well for faculty development. I will adjust the schedule accordingly if I need to. So, anyway, don't show up next Monday because doors will be locked. Hopefully have some fun next Monday with your family. And by the way, I'll take it back to this class. I believe I have it online to where you can do it online if I'm not mistaken. I'll look at that later. I believe I have it slated that way in here. Yeah, because it's hard to miss a class here. It's hard to miss a week. So I do have it online, but there'll be a podcast and everything for you to watch. You don't have to do it next Monday, just sometime next week is fine. And instead of having in class and assignment, it'll be a combination of both that you'll be doing for week 3. So anyway. Free apps. I always try to go over the top 10 free and paid apps. These are the top 10 free apps out right now. YouTube, Messenger, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Bitmoji, Toon Blast, Remind Fast Efficient School, Netflix, Spotify Music, Gmail, and Snake. For paid apps, Minecraft is number 1. It's been there for about 4.5, 5 years, I think, from both iOS and Android. Heads up, If you've not played that game, it's a fun game for groups and families. Anybody played that before, by the way? Definitely recommend. So a lot of you haven't. It's a fun game to play. Doesn't cost anything. They do have in-app purchases, by the way, where you can order or you can buy different types of heads-up categories, and you can make your own. What we do in our family with the heads-up app is my grandkids and even our kids don't know some of the family members in our history, and so we'll use the game to kind of give a description of a family member that might not be with us anymore, and they have to kind of just figure out who it is. If they don't know, we talk about it, and so that's how we do it. One of the things we do. Dumb Ways, Junior Zanies, True Skate, Plague. That's a big one. Hot game. Hot Schedules. Bloons TD. Football Guys, Fantasy Football, Facetune, Monopoly, Geometry Dash, and The Escapist. One of the reasons why I go over this free and paid is, again, showing you the apps that are out there on the App Store. But like I said in week one, 99.9% of developers who make a living developing apps like myself don't make money off the App Store. We make money off of company. What was it? What now?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Oh, 12, yeah. Yeah.
12 apps.
12 apps, yep.
No,
I got 12 apps instead of 10 on that one.
No. You have 13 numbers.
Oh, I have 13 numbers. Ah, yeah, you're right. Cutting off part of the screen, looks like. You're right. You're right. It is cutting off 2 of them on the right side. But one of the reasons I show you this is not only to show you the different apps that are out there, but also to talk about the fact that there's different categories of apps. Majority of apps on the App Store that reach the number 1, the top 10 are game apps. Majority of them. They always will be that way. It will never change. Productivity apps are not number 1 apps. They might be in the top 10, but not the number 1 apps ever. They never will be. And the reason for that is why you think. Everybody plays games. Anything else? Any other thoughts of why games are number 1? What is it?
It's entertaining.
It's entertaining. Yeah, people need a break, right? People have to take a break, or you should at least. And if it's a game that gives you that, just don't play while you're driving, hopefully. So, but, you know, find a game you like, and some of them are mindless games. Some of them are strategy. Some of them are you know, logic. Whatever type of games you like, you pretty much find them. And it does keep your brain moving on items that maybe you don't have it move on. And it's been proven, like with Alzheimer's, it's really popular for doctors to subscribe to beginning Alzheimer patients some type of either board game or app game to play to keep their mind active. That's real important to do throughout the day. Because we all do certain things, especially as you get into, you know, out of school and working full time somewhere, and no more thinking of school. You'll get in a rut sometimes, and it's good to challenge your brain to do other things. And so games is a good way to do it. So Apple News, I always try to weekly do this starting in week 2. September 12th, Apple is looking at revealing its Apple 8, iPhone 8. And it's going to be, I believe, getting rid of the home button is what they're saying on the iPhone 8. Don't know how that's going to work, but that's what the rumors are right now anyway. Also being waterproof as well is another rumor as well. And then faster processor and more memory. So this is a screen for Xcode we'll get into in just a little bit. So in fact, what I'd like you to do on your screen right now, and mine might look a little different because it's version 7, but we'll kind of go screen by screen through Xcode. So I'm going to kind of minimize that real quick to make sure I've got the same version you do in front of you. So if you'll click on the Xcode icon on the bottom of your screen, just to kind of make sure it's running. I want to kind of go through, if you go to File, once you click on the Xcode icon on the bottom, go to File, New, and then go to Project. It's going to bring up a whole bunch of different options we're going to talk about in just a second. So these are the different options in Xcode. iOS 10. Single view app is the #1 type of app to use for an app when you're creating one. Basically, with a single view app, you can build on it. You'll learn more about it this semester. A master detail app, a gaming app, a tab view app, a page view app, a viewing pictures app, video app, whatever it is you want. Gaming, master detail, page-based, tab, sticker pack application, iMessage application, Cocoa Touch framework, Cocoa Touch static library, and metal library. Those of you that are into 3D gaming or any gaming platform might have heard of Metal. It's a very popular one in gaming creation. WatchOS is another category for a template you can create an app from. A lot of apps now are creating not just a phone and an iPad, but they're also creating an iOS WatchKit app as well. Now, you don't have the full features on the WatchKit, like you can't watch full-fledged YouTube videos and all that stuff, but because really the screen's not made for it. But you can do things like monitor items, read email, get text messages, make phone calls, things like that, and tons of other. tvOS, this is for the Apple TV. This is fairly new within the last 8 months. They've upgraded a lot. Apple TV, up until recently, you could not create apps for them. Developers couldn't anyway. Apple's the only one allowed to make those. Those of you that have an Apple TV, you've noticed you can add apps now into the Apple TV. Again, single view, gaming, tab application, and the TVML application. Mac OS, create that in Xcode as well. Cocoa application, gaming, command line. And then cross-platform. Cross-platform, it could be cross-platform both for not just Mac, but it also work for Linux, work for Windows devices, work for Droid devices. And so a number of different new ones on the block in the last year. I'm going to go back to my presentation view real quick. We'll talk about that. We have some new ones there. Okay, I'm going to open this back up. 75%. So I want to talk about the different types of applications that you can create, most popular anyway, that you can create. Master detail. This type of application is used to create list-based applications, selecting an item from a list on the left side of an app to show up on the right side of an app, as an example. So the left side would have a menu of items like, say, recipes or websites or profile settings or game settings or whatever. You click on those items and on the right side shows up a full-fledged page to make setting changes. This template usually has or does provide a back button to the return to the main list, the master list. You also have a similar technique used for news-based apps, whereby selecting an item from a list of news headlines, you get to see the content of the news article once you tap on the title. On the left side, you see the title, you see the full-fledged article on the right. When used for an iPad, which is popular for master detail because it's more real estate, you could also include implementing what's called split view configuration, which means menus can collapse. So if I tap on a menu here, it shows up. I release my finger, it goes away. To where you have the full-fledged, full ramifications, full real estate of the app real estate. A lot of gaming apps will do that because of the popularity of needing more real estate with games. And a lot of games actually come out today still, by the way, an iPad only, just because of the nature of the game. It's not, doesn't render well in an iPhone because the objects are just too small. Page-based applications is another popular type, creating a template project using a page view where you turn pages a lot like a magazine on a page view. So you literally swipe your finger to the left and right and pages flip like a magazine. So it's popular for menus, popular for magazines, popular for books, which are embedded into iOS apps. Tabbed applications, very popular when it comes to businesses that want to create a web kind of look and feel for an app. So they'll convert a website to a mobile app. A lot of times we'll use tab applications. And it creates a template application with a tab bar. The tab bar typically appears across the bottom of the device. It can be programmed to contain items that when selected, change the main display. But you can always see the tabs available for you. Single view application, already mentioned, but basically this is one that 90% of the time when I create an app, it's a single view application first, because then you can add anything to it on top of that you want. If you pick other app templates besides single view, you're locked in to the content of that template. You have to strip a lot of stuff out, which can be kind of crazy sometimes and kind of a nightmare to do. So that's why I like single view applications, kind of like a blank slate to do what you want to with an application.
So if you do
everything, do what now?
If you do single view, you can turn it
into any one of those, right? Yeah, correct. And this semester, whenever I have you create apps, as weeks go on, most of the time I will have you create the app in a single view and then add, even like in master detail, add a master detail later after the single view's been created. I'll show you how to do that. Because that's, again, it's cleaner. Not to say it can't be done the other way, but I personally steer away from template anything. I like more just blank slate, and I get to build what I want. Is it easier on template? Definitely, coming out of the chute. But you can tweak the one that's single view much easier and add more bells and whistles to it and more customizations to it as you learn more coding than you can with all the other templates. Does that make sense? Then gaming is a fairly new one, actually. When we first started creating games in iOS in 2013, when I started creating games in 2013, iOS Xcode didn't even have a game kit at all. You had to import everything third party. On average, we would have to import about 225 separate files to get just a base game to work. Now with GameKit or Sprite Kit, you don't have to do that. It's all built in, especially with Metal now and 3D rendering. It's much easier for a developer to begin creating a game because they give you everything you need right out of the chute. This creates a project that takes advantage of Sprite Kit, Scene Kit, OpenGL, ES, and Metal for development of 2D and 3D games. And you'll find out more about all those acronyms as the semester goes on. Some of you might even want to create a game for your final application, or might have an idea for a game already in your head. And I'll stop on that for just a moment. Starting around week 12 to week 15, you'll be working only on your final application. And I do give you options around in the next coming weeks. I don't remember what week it is exactly coming up, to where you can either do the canned application for your homework or use it in your final application. Well, sometimes it's not going to fit in your final application, what we're working on, but sometimes it would. And if that's the case, then you could use your final application to start, the shell of it. I've had students start the shell or final application in week 2 and just start building on it. Just start building on it as they're learning, as we're going. And I've had students at the end of the semester by January already publish their app to the App Store. So it just matters how aggressive you want to be in your app development, what kind of ideas you have, how much work you want to put into it. Bare bones though, survival in here. You can survive by just starting your final app for sure in week 12 and then presenting what you have done in week 16. It's not going to be a fully fledged app by any means, but I don't expect any of them to be. But at least you have a good prototype to work with. And the reason I do that is 2 reasons. One is I've learned personally, if I don't work on apps that I can use now, I don't care. I don't care. I'm too busy. I don't really care. If it doesn't fit what I want, well, what I'm creating on average, I'm working on 10 to 15 apps a week in a mobile platform. So if what I'm learning, and I'm learning all the time, doesn't fit those 10 or 15 apps, it's a waste of my time. Does that make sense? Kind of like a carpenter or architecture. They're only going to learn, or even a doctor, lawyer, whatever. They're learning what they need to do in that project. And that, to me, in mobile app development is the best way to learn it, because you're going to keep adding to your tool set each project to project. So over the years, I've built projects up to where I can find usually 60 to 70% of an app in projects I've already created and only have to complete 30% of it, if that makes sense. So again, you're not going to get that this semester, but you can start your repository, start your library, start your projects to do that. And that's in any field, by the way. Talked about this already. We'll do more about this in our little in class, but we'll do a hello world. One of the things I do want to make, I want to camp on this for a second. When you're creating a project for Apple, it has to have a couple things in order to be pushed to the App Store. That's why they have you fill out these fields, by the way. Like the first is project name. Project name cannot have any spaces, okay? Generally, I recommend bookcase for project name, like in this case, Hello World. Organization name is going to be the company you work for or your name or your last name as a developer. When you get a developer license, unless you're a business already, which most of you aren't, you have to publish your license as your person. You are the developer, so you are the organization. And so mine would be Conkle, or if you have a website, you can use that as well. Like a lot of times I'll do C-Conkle for organization, and then and then it's reverse on the next one, which is organization identifier. So mine would be com.cconkle. Then what it does is it takes the product name and it takes the organizational identifier and concoctates them together to become the fully qualified app name. Now, the reason I mention that is it doesn't matter when you're developing locally and having people test your app. But if you ever think about publishing to the App Store an app you're working on, it's really worth your time to research in the name of the app that you're going to stick with. And the only way you can do it is go on the App Store, search for names, make sure they don't conflict your names, because if they do, you're not going to be able to use it. Make sense? You might have to tweak it a little bit to make it yours. It can't, like for an example, you can't have like Facebook 2. That won't work. Apple will reject it. Okay? Nothing in the name can be existing out in Apple. And you think about it, you're like, well, that'd be pretty easy. No, it's not, because on average today, even though majority of developers make their money, as I said, in the working world and never makes the App Store, 50-some thousand new apps are created and submitted a week. And that's a slow week in Apple. That's a slow week. Some weeks are definitely higher than that. And that are approved anyway, that are approved applications, right? So yeah, do some research on the name. If seriously you'd ever want to publish it to the App Store, which I always tell students, do a free one first, which we'll talk about more in the future. And then because changing it down the stream is sometimes difficult to do. Does that make sense? Okay, so language is Swift we'll be using. There are other languages, and the other language available is Objective-C that I started with. And then in 2014, it switched to Swift came on the block, basically. It's only been around since 2014. So, 3 years. Not even 3 years, actually. A little over 3 years, I guess. So, we're all learning, even myself, there's new stuff coming on the block all the time. Swift doesn't change as much as it did the first 2 years, but it still changes quite often in its releases. What I mean, the reason I say that is just to save you a little frustration down the road. An app you create now, if you upgrade it to Swift a year from now to get upgraded to the newest version, you're going to have to change some variables and things with that app to make it run. It will not run unless you convert it. And so now there are some tools and wizards that Swift does to kind of convert your existing apps. But some of you have to manually go in and just Google, oh, this variable's not available. Now it's this. this type is not available. Now it's this that Apple's given us. So, and that's normal in any development language, by the way. Use core data or universal. We talked about that a little bit maybe the first week. Universal is basically available for both platforms, iPhone and iPad both. Okay. Apple recommends if your app can be universal, make it universal. And they've actually made it fairly easy to do now with being able to resize a screen to fit whatever device you're on. Used to, when you made a universal, way back when it first came out, when Apple iOS first came out for developers, you had to create two screens, right? One for iPhone and one for iPad. And then you had to develop both in tandem, which was kind of a nightmare. Now you don't have to do that. When you create universal, you have one screen that's morphed and changes to your devices. And it does it within by using measurements and the accelerometer of your devices, and Swift is smart enough to resize things. We'll talk about some ways it does that automatically this semester. In fact, we'll play with a little bit tonight in your Hello World, I think. Core data. We will be getting into core data this semester as well. Core data is Apple's version of SQL. What it is, basically it's like this. The best way to explain it is, and you don't have to have any SQL knowledge, by the way, to do core data. So you've got core data, and then underneath core data, a sub of core data builds what's called a SQLite database. Okay, core data is a builder or a configurator. I like to use the word configurator. It's a configurator for the SQL database. And you don't have to, again, Apple's made core data in such a way to where you have to have limited knowledge in database language or database creation, which in database language, pretty simple on what things you can do with database language, SQL language: create, delete, update, create, delete, update, create, delete, update, and then the last one is select. Create, delete, update, and select are the 4 building blocks of database. And you'll learn enough to be able to build a core data app and use it. And I always recommend to students, if you think your app would ever have a database, which most of them do some type, whether it be just to, say profile information or whatever, go ahead and check the box core data on your app. You can add it after, okay? But again, you're having to manually type in and add code, and you can miss something. If you check core data, it's in your app. You don't have to use it initially, but if you wanted to down the road, it's there. Make sense? And the way databases work in core data, much like SQL, you have a database itself, the database itself, then a table name, and then within the table, it's going to have multiple columns, which are going to be the cells, basically. And so you got table, or fields is better mentioned, table name and table fields. But you'll learn more about that as we get into them. One of the first core data ones we create is a contact database app, which is real popular, right? Like Notes app, contact database app. I mean, it's pretty popular. Really, on this screen, all I want to mention is when you and you'll see this in just a second when we do the in-class, but when you go to create a project, there's a couple things. This is hard to see up here, but basically right here, I want to focus in on orientation. That's what this says up here. It's hard to read up here where you're at. Well, I'm not even. But portrait, and then landscape modes. Portrait is portrait, okay? Landscape is landscape kind of mode. And depending on your app, it could be both, but it could be one or the other. Like a lot of gaming apps will be landscape only because of the real estate of the app. It doesn't fit well in a portrait mode. It's only landscape. The last thing I'll mention on this screen is at the top here where my mouse is hovering is version information. when you upgrade your app, when you publish it, a couple things have to happen to get a new release. One is version number has to change. So like from 1.0 to 1.1. And you have to tell Apple what you did. Okay, a de facto update, bug fix, verbiage is what most developers put in there. They put in minor bug fixes. You've seen it before, right? Are they going to give you 100% of the stuff fixed? No, and they really don't need to. But they have to give Apple something. And so minor bug fixes is generally you have to put something in there like that. Now, there's a danger when you've submitted an app to an app store by putting more than minor bug fixes, because an Apple thinks, well, maybe they really changed a lot of things underlying that app, and it takes longer to approve it. Does that make sense? So even though developers might do quite a bit of changes to an app, they might not put everything in there for that reason. So it'll be published, so it'll be accepted earlier than later, if that makes sense. Now, Apple does test all the apps, by the way. There's people like you and I that test the apps, and they do put it against a benchmark. They run it in Xcode. They look for things that shouldn't be in there, like if it's trying to target hidden websites or if it's targeting hidden emails, it can find that out in the testing, and then it'll decline the app. And if developers do that more than once, they get one warning. They do it more than once, they're nixed from the app developer store, and you don't even get a refund because it's against the rules and guidelines to do that. So there's quite a few guidelines that we'll talk about as the semester goes on. And what's just like with any, even Androids do this now. By the way, they're doing a much better job, I think, for developers to tell people what the app's doing. People should know behind the scenes what's going on, especially when it comes to their personal data, what's going on. And if they don't, and it's found out, even in the Android world, they're starting to get more stringent on the apps in the Android market. And so, which is a good thing, I think. I mean, you don't want your data stolen from an app, regardless if it's free or not. Shouldn't be able to do that. Here's one we'll get to in just a second. A real quick splash screen that says your name, your first name, apostrophe S, first app. And on the left side of Xcode is all the files that you can access and click on them. When you click on them on the left side, they show up on the right side. And the way these are defined is what you're looking at here on the overhead, what's called a storyboard mode, storyboard mode, I'm sorry. Storyboard mode is basically where you can lay out your entire app on a storyboard and see all the pages globally from like a 30,000 viewpoint, and then zoom in on each page that you need to work on, or have teams work on separate pages. Like this semester, I've got some students working on separate pages of an app that we're working on here on campus, and it's going to be fine because they're isolated on that page I've given them to work on. And you might be thinking, well, how do you kind of merge it all together? We use a source control called GitHub that we'll be using as the semester goes on. We'll get into that. I think week 4, have you guys create a GitHub account. And GitHub is a developer's basically saving grace when it comes to keeping code safe for that developer during the life cycle of the code, meaning I can commit anything to a GitHub repo and go to any Mac in the world and download that repo as it stands, work on it, commit it again, and it stays in that github.com repo repository. I can also share repos with other people. I can do what's called, you'll learn about this semester, a pull request, where if you and I are working on an app and I can do a pull request to your stuff you're working on, you okay it, and then it merges in with my master app or something. I'd say I created the master app and I shared it with you. You can fork your repositories, meaning just like if you're eating dinner, if you reach over and grab somebody's food, you can fork an entire repo, if it's a public repo, onto your repository to work on and do whatever you want to with it. And so GitHub's a great place to explore. It's a great place to learn. It's also a great place to, again, keep your source code safe. You can create both private and public repos. The repos I'll be having you guys create as an educated student is, I think you get 5 private and unlimited public repos that you can create. And you'll be part of what's called the iOS course organization, which is our organization here on campus, which we have on average 300 to 400 active repos going on at any moment's notice. And they're not just iOS apps. They might be web apps, might be Windows apps, might be Droid apps, all in the iOS course repo. And you'll learn more about that. I think it's week 4 we do the GitHub tutorial, and you get your own account and all that good stuff. Okay, on the left side, I talk about navigation. Right side is utilities on Xcode, and that means anything where you need to rename something. You need to, like in this screenshot here, making a form an initial view controller, meaning when the app runs, it goes to that view. Okay, to naming the labels, text boxes, buttons, things of that nature. And on the right bottom is a debug window used only for developing or for debug purposes. What that means is, as a developer, a lot of times I want to see what code's doing behind the scenes as it's running. And I can put in statements to where it only shows up in the debug window and nowhere else in the app. And you'll learn how to do that this semester as well. That way, output is what it needs to be, content is what it needs to be, and app's doing what it's supposed to be doing as it's going along. Whenever you're adding objects, bottom right corner of the Xcode environment, there's a little circle that looks like it's got a phone in the middle of it, the one that's highlighted. That's the object library, and that's where you get all your objects like buttons, labels, text boxes, text fields, sliders, calendars, web browsers, game kit, map kit, all that stuff's in there. And you'll play a lot with them this semester. Now, there might be some that we don't really go over as much in the semester. That does not mean you can't use it in your app. Okay, and I'll give that as a disclaimer, I guess. And there's going to be concepts you might want your app to do, your final app to do, that we won't cover in total in the class. That's okay. One of the things I like doing is when students have an app idea, as the semester goes on, as you need help, you let me know what you need help with, and I'll give you example code to help you with whatever it is you need help with to get off the ground. Make sense? And then you can use it in your app and build upon it, basically. So don't let something we don't cover stop you from using it in your app, I guess is what I'm saying. We'll figure it out, make it work for your app to work. I'm talking about the final app that you guys are working on. We'll be working on. So what is iOS development? I'm glad you asked. iOS stands iPhone OS, or actually that's the original definition, because iPhone was out way before the iPad, and so it actually was standing for the iPhone OS. It still does, by the way, in Apple's definition guide. The operating system in Apple's mobile devices. Some of the things you learned last week that we went over a little bit, and then there's is some constants like let name :string equals Jane Doe. That's a constant. Let year int equals 2014. That's a constant. Let is fast bool, true or false. That's a constant. If we want to make a string type variable, let hello equals and something in quotes. Now hello is a string. Let world equals world. Now that's world's a string. So usually, most likely, or the way I'd usually generally develop is this way here. If I can give a type on a variable, I will, string, int, bool. But there's going to be times you can't do that. Like an example I might have mentioned last week, there might be times where you have an array that you'll learn about this semester, and that array might have different types of variables within the array. You could have images, strings, it could have integers, and in that case, you would not declare it as a type. But 9 times out of 10, variables are declared as a type, and for a reason. That way, downstream, if something gets thrown in there that it shouldn't, the IntelliSense within Xcode will tell you that. The last example on this slide talks about concatenating a string together, which you did a little bit on week 1, where basically you will use a plus symbols. And all this is doing is basically taking the variable hello, putting a space in between the variable hello and the variable world to make it look nicer. If we didn't put that space there with the 2 pluses, it would be all shoved together when it came out on first string. Arrays we'll talk about more. I don't want to get into arrays this week, but arrays, all you need to know this week is they always start with 0. Arrays do. That'll help you kind of keep that in your head. So with design considerations when you're developing apps, one of the biggest differences between iOS and other computer apps like Windows or even Mac apps is the paradigm of the window that you have. We have a limited space in mobile development, even the iPad Pros. I mean, they're getting pretty good size. Still limited space to, say, a 32-inch monitor at your workplace or 20-inch monitor, which a lot of people have. So because of that, you got to put some thought into where things are placed on a screen. Okay. The second bullet talks about, the desktop version of your application requires users to see several windows simultaneously. You need to decide if there's a different way you can accomplish this, the same task in a single screen or a sequence of screens, like maybe tabs or the master detail maybe. If not, you should focus your iPhone app on a single subset or subtask of an application instead of the wider set. Like a lot of apps, like Adobe's an example. Adobe has a lot of mobile apps, but they're not a full-fledged desktop app. They're an accessory app. One of the cool accessory apps Adobe has is where it allows you to connect to your computer, whether Mac or PC, running Adobe CS, and then use that mobile device as an extra screen for settings, for touching and moving objects, and doing things you normally couldn't do with a mouse. And that's kind of cool to do. So it's kind of an accessory app, I guess you would say, to a desktop app. So a lot of times we'll do that as well. Now, also people interacting, even though we have multiplicity of multitasking now with mobile devices, they only can access one at a time. Whereas on a Windows device, you can have 20 windows up in front of you and all little bitty windows doing something different. Generally wouldn't do that, but you could if you wanted to. Mobile devices, even though we can multitask and have 20 apps running in the background, we're only viewing one at a time. So because of that, again, it's a paradigm shift in development, if you've ever done development in other platforms, on what's needed. It's a trim down of what the full version of an app might be on a Windows device. And also, too, some apps are coming out today in mobile only. They never make Windows. They never make Macs. It's only made for mobile only because that's how popular mobile devices are getting. I think it was a year and a half ago, mobile devices for the first time worldwide surpassed sales for desktop and laptop both, which makes sense. And I'm talking tablet only, not just phones, but tablet only surpassed the sales worldwide for laptops and desktops. So logically speaking, that tells companies then and developers, should we even waste time in creating Windows apps or Mac apps, or should we devote our time only to mobile apps? Some shops have decided to do that, just their mobile apps only. Adobe is going that way, by the way. Adobe is going that way. Everything you see on the mobile, especially like the iPad Pros or the Surface Microsoft Surfaces, will mimic desktop environment, but be mobilized to where you can work on smaller screens, basically, and have a high definition as well that you don't have maybe on that desktop. So switching between apps, people switching one app or the other. Used to when iOS first came out, the app would quit and then you would start up now. Now the bottom bullet talks about what we have today, full multitasking in iOS 8 and iOS 10 and iOS 11 coming up, is where apps can run in the background all the time, like weather apps, notification apps, gaming apps, pedometer running all the time, whatever it is, can be running a lot in the background. The downside to background apps is what you think. A whole bunch of that. Yeah, it does ding your battery a little bit. I mean, and so there are ways both in iOS and Android now to where you can tweak what's running in the background or not. Do you want all these apps running in the background? Do you need them all running? No, probably not. So you can go through and just say, okay, I want maps running all the time or weather running all the time. I want calendar running all the time or whatever, maybe a handful of apps. You don't need every app running in the background. And it seems like, and it's the reason for this, marketing purposes, when developers make apps now for phones or tablets, they purposely want it to be a background app. The reason for that is they can push notifications to it easier. They can also push features to you that will tease you to want to buy an in-app upgrade, basically, right? Do that a lot now as well. In fact, the number one way for developers to make extra money on an app, or really the only avenue of developers to make a lot of money, or companies to make a lot of money to develop mobile apps, is in the in-app purchases. That's where the billions of dollars are made a month on in-app purchases. The app will come out as a freemium type app, and then you have a whole bunch of different options, and we all use them probably in here. If I was to go through, we could spend a whole hour just talking about in-app purchases that we make on different apps that we have, whether it be gaming, utility, or otherwise, that we use all the time. Mobile users don't have the time to read through a lot of content, so a lot of things are now replaced with icons, like very rich icons that people know just by looking at it. Very little instruction. One of the things that even apps are getting away from today, which used to be called coach marks, you guys might have seen those, where basically they have like little circles everywhere in the app. You tap on them and it tells you what each one does. That was real popular at one point. If you notice, if you've downloaded newer apps in the last 6 months, a lot of apps don't even have those anymore. They don't even have the coach marks at all. People weren't even using them. And so what they do is they go to like a question mark somewhere in the app in the lower right corner. Then that goes to some videos maybe that a lot of people like. It seems to lean towards more kind of a video tutorial of an app versus reading. Videos always supersede reading, by the way, when it comes to app instructions. So if you can create a real quick 30-second, this is how I get around my app. Screencasting is real easy to do, like I do it here. Doesn't cost anything to do if you find the right tools. And you can do a short video to show somebody how to do something. They will watch that 9 times out of 10 over reading something. They will, just the way we are now, where the culture is. Standard controls correctly, using standard controls correctly, making sure you understand. Some users are familiar with standard controls. They use, like, an example of a standard control would be like a back button. Profiles, that's standard. Anyone else think of a mobile app standard that you have in a lot of apps? There's no wrong answer, by the way.
The 3-line menu button.
What?
That 3-line menu button.
Yeah, the 3-line menu button, the little ellipsis line thing that you can tap on to get other menus. Anything else you think of?
Icon, it's the square and the arrow.
Yeah, the square and the arrow. That's a popular one. You can share it. Home, yeah. So those are all popular ones that people are familiar with. And anytime you have an icon that fits that, and you know it's a standard, use it. They're like, no, I'll use this flashy one. Like, it'll confuse people. Even though you like it, I might even like it. It'll confuse people because we don't have all the reading now on how-tos a lot of times, and people don't want it. And this generation, I'll put my grandkids into that, like, 8 years old and 8 to 28. You don't know how to do something. Where's the go-to place people go to now in that age? And it's even older than this, by the way. I'm being conservative at 28. Where at? Yeah, YouTube. Yeah, I mean, everybody's Google and YouTube is the 2 number 1 places people go. You don't know how to do something? Google it and find a YouTube video and learn it. What's stopping you, right? And many of you probably have done that. Maybe things around the house or whatever. I've done it before on things like DIY type stuff around the house. I've used YouTube videos. Nothing wrong with it. Just make sure you find somebody who knows what they're talking about. It's always good. What are your options when you go to create an app? I already talked about the number one app Apple wants is the Universal, which is the top one. But there also is web-only content, which is like the one we're doing for the college, the 2 apps we're working on in the college right now. We'll have both web and data-driven stuff both in the app, because there's going to be folks on campus that will be changing content dynamically on a daily basis. Well, if they're doing that, we're not going to be able to release an app on a daily basis to the App Store. So if it's fitting to have web content, and the way it goes now de facto within a business or a company is you want kind of people to have data in both web. Everything that's on the phone or tablet should, data-wise, should be on the web somewhere for the customers to view. It might not be as rich and won't be as rich as a mobile, but they should get data, the same data, if that makes sense, on the web. And a lot of times developers will switch it. They'll create a mobile app first and then add stuff to the web second, their website second. You want to create businesses create a mobile app first for the web, or mobilized app for the web, then convert it to iOS or Android second. That way you can decide real easily from that what needs to be web, what needs to be static data in an app. Do I know?
You know how like Wix, you can go from web to
Yeah, well, I'm talking about like this. An example would be daily news. Let's talk about that. Like RBC has daily news that comes out, calendar that comes out. It's constantly changed on a daily basis. And so it makes sense for that module on that page. It might not be all web content, but half or 3/4 of it might be. And it's pushing that data or pulling that data from a website, right? And then people are changing it, and then it's being sucked down to the mobile. Yeah. Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be a good example as well. So there's a lot of different examples you can think of. News, calendar, any content that is changed. I always tell customers, whether internal or external, if content is changed more than, it could be changed once a month or more, it's got to be web content only. Meaning it's got to be somewhere on a mobile website for people to change it, because you're not going to be able to release an app. Apple won't approve it that quick. Does that make sense? So it has to be content that they can access and update quickly without having the app being updated. And some of the static things in apps are not going to change, like the title of the app, the about information about the app, the contact information on the app, things like that. All that stuff's going to stay pretty static. That wouldn't have to be web driven. That could be in the app itself. So 3 types of apps: productivity, utility, and immersive. Immersive is where basically you are, kind of like I was talking about earlier, the CS, the Adobe CS tools, how they're basically combining technologies and being immersive, where you're applying mobile apps to do things they never did before. Okay, an example would be biometrics. Okay, a lot of phones and tablets now can be used to access doors in homes and businesses, where even just a year and a half ago that wasn't happening. That's really popular now. Home automation, right? Business automation, where you yourself are immersing yourself some form or fashion into the app for functionality to work. Okay, so in order for you to get your job done, if it's to get something done in life, even, it's an immersive app. Makes sense? So scheduling could be somewhat immersive. Ordering stuff could be immersive. Big now coming down the pike, you've probably seen in the news, is shopping type of apps for grocery shopping, clothing, everything's out. I mean, Amazon just bought Home Foods, and it's just going to bust out. We're just tip of the iceberg, actually, what we're going to see. Yeah. Do what now? Yeah, utility is more of a calculator where you're getting input and output. It's pretty much static type of input and output. Immersive can change all the time. An example of immersive would be a news app that's changing all the time, but data's having to be touched by many points. The news service, the customers saying, I only want these categories. The news service is going, okay, you got 50 categories to choose from. The customer goes, okay, I only want to choose 10. That's immersive. Okay. Utility is, like I mentioned, calendar would actually be a utility more so than immersive. Calculator would be a utility as well. And then productivity, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Notes, you would say would be a productivity type app. Some of these do kind of overlap each other though too. You'll see they overlap each other. So it's not an exact model here. They can definitely overlap. That makes sense. So the 3: productivity, utility, immersive. Now, where do you think gaming fits in to any of these 3? Which one does it fit more in, you think? More immersive? Probably so, yeah. Because you can change, not only your character, but your preferences, your add-ons, your in-app purchases, and the term immersive, you Google it, is getting a part of, jumping in and being a part of something, immersing yourself into something. So you're becoming a part of the app, basically. So gaming fits more in that. But I've seen games also have some utility to them as well, not just all immersive, but some utility and some productivity, so it can overlap as well. So a mobile app or productivity app, it breaks down a couple examples here. Mail app is a good one. Productivity apps help people organize things. People can find information by making progressive, more specific choices until they arrive at a desired level of detail, like the news app. I only want technology. I want world news, and that's it. I don't want nothing else. I don't care about celebrity news. I don't care about gossip. I just want this, and that's it. And people like that. I mean, I like that. I like to be able to filter my news, right? I think pretty much everyone's like that. You have your little, radio station you like to listen to, or your music you like to listen to. An example would be, trying to think, Vivo music videos. The newest version now, you can go in and select categories. It shows up on the homepage. They didn't used to have that, and they're constantly changing theirs all the time, from feedback from users on what it is that makes the app better for them. Productivity app also could be things like data organization of any type, multiple views, displaying one level of hierarchy at a time, like calendars would be good sometimes in that productivity. See a month view, task view, agenda view. Utility app, things that require minimal input, like a calculator or weather. I'm going to enter in my zip code, and that's it. And it tells me the weather, both today's and a 10-day forecast, right? Apple has a built-in weather app, so does Droid's built-in weather. So that's just one example where you tap the lower right corner icon, put in your town, like Cupertino there, and it gives you the forecast. You can put multiple towns in. You can swipe and put multiple towns in if you want to. Immersive should be some rich environment, mostly full screen at times. That's why it fits well with the gaming world. Media rich environment, Netflix, Hulu, all those type of apps, Amazon Video, Vivo, YouTube, a whole bunch of different examples out there. Also mentions a bubble level. I actually have a bubble level app that I've used to hang pictures and stuff around the house. It works pretty good. By Stanley Tools, I think. I don't know if you guys ever played with one of those, but it works pretty good. And so they even have them now to where they have these levels now to where you put it against a wall, and then it basically you can use the light on the camera, and it can tell you what it's going to be on the other end, just on the wall, and then you bring it back, and it gives you like a red line in the camera if stuff's level or not. When you view it from one picture to the next, is a room level, or is a construction level, or whatever the case may be. So there's an example there. You literally put the phone against the edge, either top, bottom, left, right, mostly top, bottom, or mostly bottom, because you have the buttons there kind of extruding on the top and right. So mostly bottom is how I've used it. So when you think of an app you might develop, this is just food for thought. There's nothing to do right now, but be thinking of it definitely. For free or for fun, any topic, think of one. Be thinking of one. Something on the App Store that is already similar out there that you want to build upon. Study it, learn how it works, because there's, Steve Jobs always said there's no app that's like 100% original. You've seen some version of something, whether even it might be a paper game or a board game. But so you saw something somewhere, you had an idea. There's nothing wrong with that. And so, try for new ideas, new ways to, and I always tell students, think of an app that would help you and your little ecosystem where you live in, and your family, your friends, your coworkers, your job. What type of app would help you? And it could be utility, immersive, whatever. Or somebody mentioned a game app. What's a game app out there that you thought of that nobody's created? Create it. Think of it. Think of an idea. Because I like to think of, at least, I try to keep, and we'll be thinking of, we'll start the app journal next week, where I'll have you put down app ideas, okay, of what type of apps you're thinking of, their purpose of those apps, what they are. And so you're kind of germinating your mind into thinking of different apps and different things to do with apps. Because that's the only way, in my mind, for you to get really involved into app development is for you yourself to have some really cool ideas, or ideas that you maybe had already, and you just want to kind of keep fleshing them out. So after hearing about productivity, utility, immersive, think about the type of information your app would want to display. Again, because it's mobile, you're limited in its real estate. And in theory, the type of application you create is obvious to you, and it has to make sense to you as well. Okay? You can always explain it later and make it simpler for other people, but if it doesn't make sense to you, it won't work at all, ever, right? You can make stuff work, by the way, just by sheer will over time. You can. And then make it user-friendly later. Make sense? Give functionality for so many students worry so much about functionality or the details first, and not so much about functionality first. I want you to think about major overview functionality first. Then you can worry about the details later. Have people tweak it, debug it, say, well, that's misspelled, this doesn't work, I don't understand what that means. You can tweak all that easy, 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 easy. That's easy stuff to do. That's low-level programming. High-level programming is thinking of the high-level functions, getting them to work in a way that you like and that works for your app, and that gets things done, basically. You can always make it pretty later. Does that make sense? Don't just port things to iOS. Make the iOS app itself something that stands by itself. Even like the utility for Adobe, that utility that I talked about, have the extra menus and the touch screen and moving objects around. In and of itself, it also has its own little app within it that you can do stuff with. It stands by itself. User will want to use your application, use it briefly, or move on to something else. If your application relies on reading a manual or long stretches of time going through a bunch of coach marks, they'll be like, forget it, not doing it. I've done it. You've done it, right? He looked at an app and it had like 12 tabs you had to go through before you hit OK to see the app. I'm like, nope, don't have time. And it might be a great app, but why do we put all that stuff in the front? It just impedes the movement, I think. Reporting versus editing. 80-20 rule, meaning that, you've maybe heard of this before. 80% of people or 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Well, 20% of your app should do 80% of the work. Okay, that's a high level view that I'm talking about. Focus your iPhone app or iPad app on features that meet needs of the greatest number. Not to be millions of people. You can just be, okay, this section of people could really use this app. And the example I'll give you is that a student is a real estate person in town who wanted an app to go to a house, take pictures, which we know they do already, right? But then somehow get it to go back to the home office without them having to worry about naming it. Where was it at? Where was I standing? You know, all that good stuff. So we created an app over the semester of basically you would walk up to anything, take a picture. It would get a geo coordinates of where you're at immediately, where you're located at. It would then email or submit into a Dropbox folder, a PDF and a PNG file, both. The PDF actually, when they brought it up in the home office, would have a link at the bottom of it, say at the front of the house, a link in the bottom of it that would link them right to the map of where it's located at. So they could literally bring it up in the app, hit the link button, and go, you know, driving directions or whatever app they wanted to use beyond that. And so that was the idea. It could also be shared. And that came out of the need of a real estate student wanting a utility type of app to help them with their job. Because they spent about 3 hours at night tagging all of them, naming them, where was this address at. This saved them literally 3 hours a day once it was done. So that's pretty significant time that it saved. And this one real estate company used it that he worked for, and so I believe it went on to the App Store. And so I created a version of it when we were working on it. I think he took it on further, specifically just for the real estate company. So what we're going to do is, if you go to the in-class exercise, we're going to have you download a beginning file. But you know what? I think this is going to be easy enough to where you shouldn't have to do that. I was going to have you download the source code and then add to it, change some stuff. But all I'm going to have you do is a real simple hello world. It's going to put the splash screen of your full name. It'll come up and have a label in the middle of it that has your name on it. And that's it. So just get started. So I don't think we need to download the source code. You can do it later if you want to. Oh, by the way, I did update the lab hours. Saturday lab hours we can't schedule in here, but this room is open from like 9 to noon or something, 8:30 to noon, something like that. I did put that on lab hours, by the way. Okay, so let's do this. I'll walk this through with you together. So you guys still on this screen, by the way, from earlier, or no? No? Okay, I'll start over then. If you are there, just stay there, but if you're not, click on Xcode, File menu, New, Project. And I'll minimize everything here to where you can see it. All right, and we want a single view application. So select single view application. Then click Next. Then I want you to type in here, first app. It's fine. And do you guys have the organization name Rock Valley College already? Yes. And edu.rockvalleycollege in the identifier, organization identifier? Okay. Then on the grayscale underneath that should be edu.rockvalleycollege.firstapp, all one word. Make sure that looks like that. Make sure the language is Swift, universal on the devices, and uncheck the 2 unit tests below. We don't want that. By the way, what that's used for, what it sounds like, it's to test, it's test data basically. It just dumps in there, which I never use. I want to put my own data in there. So anyway, first app, the only thing you had to fill on this screen, everything else, and uncheck the bottom 2 include buttons. Everybody got that? Yeah.
Did you say we should always use data?
No, we're not for this one, but normally, yeah, if you think the app's going to be like the final app you're going to work on, if you think it would, or in any future app you ever work on, If you think core data could ever be used, check it. But we're not going to do it on this one. You are right in that. If you think it ever could use it, you would want to. But this one's just going to be a simple hello world app, so we're not going to use that. But you are right in what you just said. If you think it ever would, you definitely want to check it. Click next. Now, when you click next, it'll take a little bit to render. And what we're going to do is on the left side of your screen here, if you look on the overhead, we want to double click on desktop. And it should look like mine, hopefully. Let me know if it doesn't so I can kind of come by and help you. So it should say desktop at the top. At the bottom, it should say source code. Do not check it. It should only be unchecked. And then it should say cancel create on the bottom right. We want to go ahead and click create. All right. On this screen, I just want to go over here on the device orientation. We're going to leave it as is, but just to show you what we talked about earlier on the slides, here's where you would change the orientation if we wanted to be, say, landscape only. We would uncheck portrait, or portrait only. We would uncheck landscape. And we'll talk more about that this semester. There are like gaming apps, which take up the entire screen, that we might have to do what's called require full screen. Might need to hide a status bar. Apple's real finicky, though, on hiding the status bar. They want people to see that battery icon for sure, and the time, for sure the battery icon, but there's some apps that do cover that, and if it needs to, it needs to. Okay, next on the left side, let's talk about the makeup here on the left side. This is all the files that I'm hovering over on the left side of the app on Xcode. On the right side is the project profile type information. In the middle is all the different types of sections you can go to in a Swift Xcode app, which we'll go over more this semester as time goes on. And then on the upper right corner, I want to focus on this and have you play with it real quick. See over here on the overhead. Let's see what I'm on. There it is. This is highlighted blue. If I click on it, it goes away. So we go ahead and do that on yours. Click on this one. The debug window comes up here in the middle. And then click away. Click on this one and bring it back. So anytime you need more real estate in the middle, which you will a lot of times when you're on the storyboard, you can hide your left, right, or bottom right here in Xcode, which helps a lot. Okay, every app when you create it, regardless of what type of project it is, this is a single view, it'll always have an app delegate, which I'll just go over these. You don't need to click on them. You can if you want to. But the app delegate is basically what's hit first when the app runs. The app delegate is what's core data's in, and maybe global fields that you use, global variables you use throughout your app. View controller. It'll always come with a view controller, which is your very first view it adds in the app. Also main.storyboard, which we'll go back to at the end after we're through going over the left side here. If I click and just wait, it takes a little bit. Just click once and wait. It's going to show up in the middle of that screen there that's full of text now with the storyboard. And the storyboard sometimes takes a while to load the first time, like mine is. And in the storyboard view, if you look on the overhead here, down here where my mouse is hovering, this icon right here can show or view the outline of the entire app right here. And a lot of times while I'm building an app, I will collapse this so I can see more of the storyboard. Also down here at the bottom, mine says 70% right now. Yours might say something different. I can keep clicking negative on that and literally move. The only way to move these around, by the way, is you have to click on the top title bar right up here, not these buttons here, but the top title bar, and I'll blow it up a little bit so you can see it, right here to move these around. If I click here, it doesn't move, click here, it doesn't move. It has to be on this title bar. Anytime I say title bar, that's what I'm talking about. Another quick tip I'll show you while we're in this view. If you take your view down So like 25 or 30%. I'll do mine at 25%. And I'll bring it over here to the left. You can do that on yours. And then with, take your mouse and click on that until this little icon here is selected, the view controller icon. And you'll know it's selected because if it's not selected, it'll be yellow. If it is selected, it'll be darker around that yellow. I got that? And once you select it, you can do a Command D on your keyboard. And it's going to duplicate that. In fact, let me do mine. I'm going to undo mine and do it again so you can see it. It's a little tricky the first time. So I've got mine selected over here, and the yellow is showing. Control D duplicates that, and it actually puts it right on top of each other. And you have to kind of move it. You see how you kind of move it? Control D, or Command D. I'm sorry, I said Command, didn't I? I said Control. I'm sorry. It's Command D. I apologize for that. It's Command D, and it'll duplicate it. Control D will not work. Command D will. But you might be like, well, I don't see them duplicating. They actually stack them on top of each other by default. That's Command D. And Command D is pretty much universal in the Mac world when it comes to duplicating stuff. And that's nice to do. Here's where I use this a lot. I'll get a home page or a page I want that's going to be on every page, right? Whether it be buttons or images or logos or whatever. That'll be my template for the entire app. Well, instead of doing it on every one of my views that I'm going to have to do on later, I just get the one like I want and then duplicate it multiple times. Okay. Now we can go ahead and show you how to delete these. You just select them again, click on with the mouse on the title, and hit delete, and it deletes it. It takes it back to the beginning. Okay. And then I'm going to collapse this back now by clicking on the outline here. Okay, and I'll bring this back up to, say, 75% to where I can see a little bit in my window there. Okay, next is assets. Assets is where all the app icons will be, which you'll learn how that works this semester. So the app icons would be what's on the home page of the iOS device, whatever app icons. And there's actually a website that we use called makeappicons.com. That's a company that does a really great job. You just give it a nice high quality image at a certain dimension, which you'll learn what that is, and it ships back to you 40 or 50 different versions of that image to where you just dump it into this assets area, and you have all the icons and everything you need for all different types of iPhones, iPads, all that good stuff. So that's what that's for, assets are. Launch.storyboard, launchscreen.storyboard. Let's click on that. The launch screen.storyboard, I believe, should be blank right now. I believe it should be blank. Is yours blank? Okay. What we're going to do is come over here to the right side of your Xcode environment where my mouse is. I'll move it around on the overhead here so you can see it. I want you to click on this icon right here, which is the object library. It's the circular one. It's the third one over from the left. Scroll down till you find a label. Once you find a label, click and drag. When I mean click, I mean just press your mouse down and drag it into the interface here like I'm doing on the overhead until the two blue lines show up like mine are, both vertical and horizontal. What that means is it's centered in the view. As soon as you get the two blue lines show up, you can release it. Let me see if everybody's got that. You want that little circle right there. And then scroll down and find the label. And then click and drag, click and hold it and drag it over into the view. So it's centered like mine in the overhead. As soon as it's centered in the middle of your view, just go ahead and double click on that label and type in your first name, apostrophe S, space, first, space, app. So mine would be Chuck's first app, Fred's first app, Sally's first app. So put all three words in there. I'll do it with you. Now, like mine, you'll notice because it's not centered anymore, I can click away is how I always recommend. Click away from that label, then click back and click and drag it back to the center. But it's always best to click away first. When I mean click away in some area that doesn't have an object. It could be here, wherever. And then once you select that label again, drag it up and down, left and right till you get those blue lines, which means it's just centered in the middle of that screen. Okay. Then do a Command S on your keyboard. Command S will save it where it's at. Then we're going to click on the main.storyboard on the left side of Xcode again. I'm going to have you do the very same thing that you did on the launch screen on the view here. So the very same thing, bring a label in, same verbiage. In fact, let's change a little bit. Let's put my first app instead of your first name apostrophe. Let's just put my first app in the label. So we're going to put it right there in the middle again, just like you did on the splash, the launch screen. It used to be called splash screen, so I'll always say splash screen, by the way. Yeah. Oh, no, you just click on main.storyboard and that view controller, that first one you had in there should still be in there.
Yeah, mine went away.
If it went away, did you delete all three of them?
Yeah.
If you did, it's no big deal. Here's what you can do. Over on the left side on the object viewer, there's a view controller at the very top. Just click and drag it into your environment. Okay. And then you'll have that view like I've got there by clicking and drag it in there. And one of the things I'll talk about in just a second is the view controllers on the storyboard all need what's called a class, which the class for this one's already built in. It's called viewcontroller.swift. That's the class for this view controller here. And if we click on view controller real quick, the view controller.swift on the left side, you'll notice it says at the top, UI import kit, which stands for user interface kit, then the class view controller, and then noticing in purplish, UI view controller. This class is only good for a view controller. There's view controllers for what the view controller here I have highlighted with my mouse. There's a view controller for navigation control. There's a view controller for table view control. There's a view control or a class. I mean view controller. There's a class for view controller, a class for navigation control, a class for table view control, so on and so forth. So just note that as you build as you're building views or tables or anything into your app, each one of those needs a class, and that's what this is right here. It's a class. And let me show you real quick. In fact, before you get out of this, at the top it should say be created by CIS280 on 8/28/17. Instead of CIS290, put your first and last name. I put created by Chuck Conkle on, and then the date's already in there, copyright's already in there, done. And then this will do that for you at home or here in class. You will need to tweak it to your person. If you have a Mac at home or you use a Mac somewhere that's yours, it'll stay in there for you each time. It'll know it's you that you're logged in as. We logged in as what, CIS290 or whatever. Okay, click on main.storyboard. And I want to show you on main.storyboard, if you'll take and click on this icon on your view controller, which is a view controller icon. There's three of them actually. There's view controller, first responder, and exit. Click on view controller. The reason I want to show you this is where you bind the class. It's already done for us on the first view controller. We just want to kind of show you where it's at. Over on the right side of your screen, click on this icon here, which is the identity inspector. It's the third icon over, that's hovered on the overheads in blue. And under class, view controller should already be selected in there. But if we had other classes, we would select that. And the kicker on a class is you can't have an object do anything or change if that view is not bound to a class. And you'll learn more about that as time goes on. But 9 times out of 10, if you're doing an app and you're trying to get starting next week, I'll show you how, actually week after next, no, it's next week, where you're dragging buttons to your code to get it to do something like a click event or something. That won't work if the class is not bound to that view. Okay, that's about it. That's real basic there. Okay, now what we got to do with this still selected, this view controller still selected, I want everybody to go to the editor menu at the top of Xcode, go down to resolve auto layout issues, and reset to suggested constraints. I also want you to do that with the launch screen.storyboard. And all this is going to do, it's going to render these views for whatever device it's connected on. So editor, resolve. If you don't see reset to suggested constraints, you've not clicked on this icon here, the view controller icon. Okay? This has to be selected first. Editor, resolve auto layout issues, reset to suggested constraints. One last thing I'll show you before we run this. On the upper left corner of Xcode, it says a play button, stop button right here I'm hovering over, the name of your app, which is first app. Then right here to the right of that is all the simulators available to you within your Xcode environment. So you don't have to, you literally simulate them in those environments before you port them to the real thing. Does that make sense? So by default, everybody should probably have like an iPhone 7 or 7 Plus. How many has a 7 Plus on yours? Okay, I think that's a default for most in here. But it'll go all the way back to the 5th generation iPhones. Below that, by the way, would not work with this version of Swift and Xcode. Wouldn't work. I think it's version 9 below wouldn't work. And so you can, by the way, have different versions of Xcode on a Mac machine where you have an older, app that doesn't run on older or newer Xcode environments. You can download older ones as well. Okay, now what we're going to do is Command R will run the app, and it's going to take a while, so don't do anything while it's compiling. Just kind of let it do its stuff. It's going to compile it, whatever your simulator is. Most of you, I think, is iPhone 7 Plus. What it has to do is build the simulator. It loads it just like a real iPhone would be loaded. You'll see it pop up. Once it starts popping up, though, you'll see a black screen somewhere in this area over here. Once it does build it successfully, there it is right there in mine. It starts popping up. You can tap on that one time once you see it. You can click on it once and then go up to the window menu. Tap on that simulator to where you see this. You should see this menu when you click on it. Simulator, file, edit, hardware, debug, window, help. We want to go to the window menu and scale it down to where you can see the whole thing in your window. I have to go probably to 25% to see it. You might not have to go that low, but just so you can see the entire phone in your screen, okay? And it's booting up just like a normal iOS would boot. And this is only the first time, by the way. You only have to do this the first time whenever you compile your app for the very first time during the session you're working on the app. It has to go through this load process. But then every test after that you run it, it doesn't go through this every time, just the first time, just like a real phone would. You start it up. Now, if you exit out of the simulator, you do have to start all over again. I'm building it just like this and starting it up. And you'll be able to use the simulator just like you would a real phone. You'll have icons on it. You can click on it, click and hold the icon and shake it to get rid of it, just like on a real phone. And the reason I told you not to touch anything was it takes about 96% of the processing power to render the simulator and to load it the first time. And anything you do outside of that slows that process down. So I generally just don't do anything. During the load time, go get a drink of water or take a walk sometimes. So take the dog for a walk, come back. Depends on how patient you are. If you like to see lines going across the screen. I tell my grandson, we play this load game, I tell him, I said, if you think it's going to be slow and you want it to be slow, it's going to go faster. And he thinks I'm telling him the truth, but I'm not. But it does work for him. He goes, wow, it went faster. I want it to go really slow. So it's loading all the libraries for the phone, all the executables for the phone, just like the real thing. So I do recommend when you're doing a universal app to run it in multiple types. So, iPhone 7, iPad Air, iPad Pro, all that good stuff. And we'll talk more about later next week. But you can also at the bottom tell what type of orientation you want it to show up at. Do you want all your screens to be landscape, all to be all portrait, whatever the case may be. The new version of Xcode, if you choose landscape as a de facto, it always comes up portrait. You have to physically flip it. In the simulator, you have to flip it to show up in landscape mode. Now, if we watch closely as it gets toward the end, we should see the splash screen very quickly pop up with your name and then go away. Then it should come back to the My First App label on the very first view. And with that, you would have created your very first mobile app in iOS for most of you. Some of you might have already done it before. But for most of you, that's the very first. We always do that in programming, the very first hello world type of app. But it is rudimentary, and it's fundamental to learning the whole thing and getting up and off the ground. You got to start at the ground level.
I have to ask, mine just came back black. It was said the first app at the top.
Mm-hmm.
This one's black. It had like the first app icon up here, something else over here.
Let's go see if
I scaled it down to 25.
Okay, let's make sure that view is bound to the class. Yeah, there it was right there. So if you get all black, it's just not bound to a class. So it might be that you deleted well, you did delete all your views. That happens, yeah. So if you get all black, you don't have your view bound to the class. And I can help you do that. That happens. And anything, by the way, and I'm glad that came up on yours, because anytime anything does not work on a page or a view, 9 times out of 10 is because it's not bound to a class. And if it's not bound to a class, it won't do anything. It won't do any, and no functionality whatsoever. It doesn't know what to load. Because it uses, the app delegate uses those classes to determine what loads.
It's a build fail.
Do what now?
Build fail.
Let's make sure this is not going to be real quick. Okay. Oh, yeah.
also could do those.
Oh, you have the launch screen. Launch screen here. Looks like it might have been bound to. Oh, this is Storyboard. There we go.
So you just have to like hit it after you do all that.
Yeah, still on the video, it's not showing up right. Make sure this is actually. So just add your labels to the splash screen, to the screen, launch screen, and also to the view controller. All right, so I'll run mine here, and I'll run around and look at everybody's screen real quick. Just leave this one up in front of you, and if you need help as I come around, I'll help you. I know on his, he deleted the classes, and so we just built a new project, so that's what I just Awesome. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. I'm going to show you how to package this and send this to the in-class. So go ahead and stop the app. Xcode, quit Xcode. It should be on your desktop, I believe. We can also exit out of this simulator I'm moving on the overhead. Simulator, quit simulator. And you should have a folder called First App. Control click it with your mouse. Press the control key on your keyboard, the lower left key. Click that folder with your mouse and do compress First App. And it's going to show it that way. And let me make sure I got the right naming convention here for that. You're just going to name it your last name week 2. Last name week 2. And submit it into week 1 in class. So last name week 2. Here's mine, Conquer week 2. And that's what you will submit into the week 1 or week 2 in-class exercise. And the source code for everything that we just did as well is down there as well, which I have each. From here on out, you'll have source code you can download even on your homework assignment to see what's what. Also, just I know I mentioned this, but there's a lot of information the last couple of weeks. Anytime you want to open up Xcode with just the extension of the project, it always ends with .xcode proj. That file will open up Xcode for you natively. As we get into week 4, though, we start doing a GitHub repo. I usually have you open the project from GitHub, just so you know, make sure you're in the right place. Questions on that while you're doing that? Okay, I want to talk about homework while you're finishing up uploading that. You're basically going to create a brand new playground this week. There is a podcast already, by the way, for this week's in-class assignment. And there's also a podcast for the take-home assignment. There's also a podcast already in there for this week's in-class as well, if you want to redo it again. But create a new Swift playground named My Variables. Place a comment at the top that is your full name, course name, and date. And the dates whenever you work on it. It doesn't have to be just within this next week is fine. Declare 2 integer variables. The first variable with a value of 75, second value of 50. Use comparison operators. Test if the first variable is greater than the second. And display value is greater using the print command. Create a for loop using a min value of 0 and max volume of 20. Increment by 1. Display the value for each for loop using the print statement. And then compress it together. Last name, week number, and this time same as we did 3 in class, and you'll submit it in this area here. I'll go here real quick to show you. When you click on example source code from here on out, it'll take you to generally a GitHub repo or somewhere in Eagle. Like on this one here, it takes you to a GitHub repo. And if I keep clicking here, that's not the right one. Back. There it is. So there's the actual information with comments and notes and things to help you. There's more than enough information, by the way, in here to help you with your homework. Also, make sure to do your reading. That'll help you as well. Generally, your in-class will give exactly what you need, plus a little bit more sometimes. You can always add more to this playground, though, too. You're not just isolated to just this right here. If you want to keep adding stuff and doing whatever, that's fine. You're definitely more than welcome to do that. Somebody had their hand up in the back. Yeah. Nope, I wanted the zip file, the entire folder, the first app folder. So that folder was on your desktop on the first app, press that whole folder. That's all I do. So anytime I have you guys compress things, which really will only be till week 4, because after week 4, you guys are submitting everything through GitHub anyway. But anytime I say, hey, send me your code, I want the entire folder of your code, make sense? And compress it together, send it to me. Yes. Proj, that's the root file for Xcode to run. That's the project file.
Why do you want me to?
I was just telling you earlier, that's the one if you had a folder, right, with a project in it, and you wanted to double click on a file, kind of like a Word document, it's docx, right? To start an Xcode project, you have to click on that file with that extension. That makes sense? If you don't want to do it that way, well, you have to do that way, whether it's you double click on a folder and open it, or even in Xcode, if you go to File Open, you still have to go to the Xcode proj file. Do what now? Yeah, open up you can do it one of the 2 ways. You can open up Xcode within the folder, right, by double clicking on, if I'll use the example from tonight, here's my first app folder, right? If I want to open up Xcode right now, I just double click on that first app.xcode proj, It starts Xcode up, done. Make sense? Because if I open up any other file in that folder, it will not open up the project for Swift. It will only open up that file. Because you can imagine as your apps get bigger, you'll have, like, you know, like if I opened up just, for instance, a view controller, it would only open up the view controller. This opened up the entire project. And I'll actually do that to show you what I'm talking about. So I click on the view controller that we did tonight, or actually done for us. I had you guys put a comment in there. If I just double click on that, it'll open it up in Xcode, but that's not a project. That's just a file. Make sense? Good question though. Any other questions on what to do this week? Make sure and do your reading. Do it in this order. Do the reading for this week if you've not already done it. Watch the podcast. Look at the source control. Then do your homework. If you do it in that order, you should have zero problems. Because the first thing I'll say is, did you do your reading? Well, no, not really. Did you watch a podcast? Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to do it, right? Yeah. Did you look at the source code? No. So those three you've got to do first before you do each week's assignment. And by the way, you will have those three in every week's assignment. You'll have reading, podcast, source code of everything that's due. And starting next week in week 3, you'll get extra credit for doing above and beyond what's required for the in-class. Okay? Like 20 points each week. I'll give you for extra credit just for doing it. And students always love doing extra credit anyway. Kind of reminds me of grade school, I think. I love doing extra credit when I was in college. I always did extra credit. The reason I did it was this. It was selfish purpose. You know why? You're always thinking down the road, right? Hey, if I don't do so hot in some project or some paper, yeah, I can use this extra credit. So definitely, yeah, it's for selfish purposes, that's for sure. But you don't have to do much extra, just something. That shows me you're doing something extra, right, each week, and you're thinking outside the box a little bit. You're staying within the confines of the topic and the project, but you're actually, you know, putting a little more work into it. Make sense? All right. So 619 from here to the end, you can continue to work on week 1 stuff, or you can work on week 2 stuff. You can talk to each other about your apps, whatever you want to do from here on out, or you can leave. It's up to you. The lab hours, I will make mention again, and I've had a few contact me already on that, so I want to touch base on that. I did update the lab hours, and a few of you have emailed me on needing help. I try to reply quickly on help because I know you're usually either in here working on it at the time. And the fastest way, if you're in here working on it and you need help like pretty quickly, I would suggest the cell number here, which is my Google number. It'll come directly to my text message. That way I can generally just reply back on my phone, do this, do that, whatever. You know, you didn't add this, or like tonight, the class thing, maybe could be it. You didn't bind a class, or I might just say, after back and forth for about 15 minutes, a lot of times I'll say, it might be a good idea just to start the project over. And you're not going to like that. But believe me, it'll be much easier doing it that way. Sometimes I'm trying to figure out, especially if you've tried all the troubleshooting steps that I've given you and nothing's working, without me actually being here, it's hard for me to see it right then. So most of these projects this semester, in fact, all the take-home projects are just adding to what we've done in the in-class for the most part. And so starting over again is good practice, by the way, because you'll get better at it every time you kind of redo something over and over again. And so you're already here already. And so instead of spending an hour debugging and trying to fix something, a lot of times you can just start over again and get it done half the time, like 30 minutes or something. So that's my experience anyway. And so any general questions before we go? All right, I'll be here hanging out for a bit, and then otherwise you're free to go, free to hang out, work on your stuff. Week 1 stuff due 11:59. Week 2's during next Monday at 11:59. And make sure you've submitted your in-class before you leave. Each week we will be submitting that before you leave for the most part. There are a few weeks we won't be doing in-class, but for the most part we will. And I will come walk around those that have their hands up and help you out. Do what else? Yeah, let me right there. Let me close out this Hangout.